Now let's talk about the why question. Why now? Why is a world spirituality based on integral principles, which has at its core the democratization of enlightenment, which is the natural emergence of a unique self-consciousness, right? Why is that both a possibility today in a way that it never was? And why is it a vital and urgent necessity today, right, in a way, right, that it never was? 4 reasons. Number 1, whenever there's a shift in evolutionary conditions, so there's a commensurate shift in the evolution of consciousness, in the evolution of knowledge, of gnosis, in the evolution of spirit. So for example, when the techno-economic base shifted and we moved from an agrarian economy, meaning an economy based on the plow, based on large farms, on heavy manual labor, when that shifted after the Renaissance and before the Western Enlightenment, as the Industrial Revolution began to sweep the Western world, right, and industry replaced agrarian, heavy farming. So as that happened, as that shift took place in evolutionary conditions, new consciousness emerged, which included democracy, which included feminism, right? Because the feminine, for example, was freed, right, from a sense of being weaker because the feminine, needing to give birth and being physically not as strong, right, couldn't manage the plow. When the plow was no longer the instrument of power, so the possibility of a women's suffrage, of feminism, could emerge. Shift in evolutionary conditions produce a shift in consciousness. There's an incredibly important, mind-boggling, hair-raising, critical to discern shift in evolutionary conditions happening in the world today, which is that our challenges, our problems, are no longer local, they are global. And I shared this when I was first talking to my friend Ken Wilber about the need for a world spirituality. And I shared this perspective with him, and I think, I felt like I could see in his eyes, right? Ken, if you're watching, right? It's this that shifted him. He said, wow, right? This is so true. And then he said, wow, this is what I've been thinking for the last 20 years, right? Why we need a world spirituality. And this is the place that we actually met in our conversation. We both came to this conclusion independently, right? That in a world in which there are global challenges, right? In which it's no longer I live in Nepal, there are Nepal problems. I live in Amsterdam, in Holland, there are Amsterdam issues. I live in Iowa or Kansas, there are Kansas problems. No, the problems that face us that are most pressing are problems that can destroy all of us. They're global challenges. They're world challenges. And as world problems emerge that can't be solved locally, there needs to be a commensurate response shift from the world of spirit. What needs to emerge is a global world spirituality. Global problems, global spirituality. World challenges, world spirituality. That's number 1. That's critical. Number 2, world spirituality is possible today because for the first time we have a critical mass of people who are at world-centric consciousness. When we say world-centric, we're referring to levels of consciousness. We begin at egocentric consciousness, right, where my circle of caring and compassion, right, is myself and my immediate environment, my family, those people who help me gain my core security. Then we move to sociocentric or ethnocentric consciousness, where my circle of caring and compassion is my country, my people, my tribe. Right? I'm rooting for my sports team. That's my team. Right? There's a sense of identity, right, with the tribe or with the nationality. Then I leap another level of consciousness, and I move to world-centric consciousness, where there's a sense of being a global citizen. Right? My circle of caring and compassion embraces not only the ego, right, my egoic circle, not only my ethno circle, but I'm world-centric. So for the first time in the history of planet Earth, post-World War I, a critical mass of people attained world-centric consciousness. That's never been true before. So while there have been probably 15 to 20 major cultural attempts in the history of planet Earth to articulate a world spirituality, it actually could never take root because there were never a critical mass of people at world-centric consciousness. There were sometimes avant-gardes, people ahead of their time, and usually the people who tried to initiate a world spirituality vision were people ahead of their time, but they were so far ahead of their time that there wasn't a fertile ground of consciousness in which it could take root. But today, when for the first time we have this post-World War I critical mass of people at world-centric consciousness, world spirituality becomes a genuine possibility. That's 2. 3. For the first time in the history of consciousness, all of the great teachings of the great spiritual traditions are available to us. That was never true before. You can actually access today, in translation, the teachings of all the great traditions, and there are lineage teachers from all the great traditions teaching outside of their traditions. So you can actually access that gnosis today in a way that was never possible. That's the third major reason. 4, what's available today is not only the best wisdom of the pre-modern traditions, of all the great traditions of spirit, but what's available today are new great traditions. The great traditions of modernity, which are science primarily, democracy in the realm of government, psychology, right, in the realm of we might call the human sciences, right? So you have the natural sciences, you have the human sciences, right, psychology, right, and science, and you have the social sciences, democracy. All of those play an essential role in a world spirituality. None of those were available in pre-modernity. So you have the great traditions of pre-modernity, you have the great traditions of post-modernity, and post-modernity, right, is the intuition of evolution, right, that we live in an evolving universe, and the realization that context matters, that every context, right, creates content within it. And actually I'm able to separate today between what we might call the depth structures and the surface structures. The surface structures of the various religions, for which they fought and died and killed. The surface structures are actually based on local context. But the depth structures, the shared depth structures, right, of all the traditions, right, those, right, are available today, right, and we can actually see today the common depth structures in a way that we were never able to. We're able to discern between context, which is the surface structures, and depth, right, essence, which is the depth structures. So what we have available today, and this is number 4, are the best of the pre-modern, modern, and postmodern traditions. And we can gather that all together. So what we're able to do today is, and this is number 5, right, we're able to actually, I'm adding from 4, I've gone from 4 to 5, we're able to gather all this data together, right, and compare it, and to actually assert what are the depth structures. We can actually say, okay, all the religions share these 10 depth structures. And all of them doing experiments in utilizing, deploying the eye of the spirit came to these conclusions about the nature of what is, about the purpose of existence, but what it means to be a good, true, and beautiful being in this world. What the nature of human obligation is. Right? We're able to gather, right, the best understandings and see what do they share in common. What they share in common, those are the depth structures. Right? That's a possibility only in modernity. So modernity brings with us, number 4, right, the best of pre-modern and modern, and then post-modernity and postmodern. So world spirituality is not just the great truths of the old traditions. World spirituality is, right, the best of pre-modern, modern, and postmodern. Right? And number 5, right, what we're able to do in this postmodern context, right, is to gather, right, all of the great truths of these different periods of history, right, and then identify what are the shared understandings of all these systems. Those shared understandings, wow, that's compelling. Right? The shared understandings that everyone came to the same conclusion about, which we now realize as we gather all the information. All those are constituent parts and essential building blocks, cornerstones of world spirituality that are only today available. That's a big deal.